Hello, welcome back everyone to AI Ramblings with Neil McWana over there, Michael Parekh over here, episode 23, and we're going to be on a fast clip today because boy, Neil, there's a lot going on. A lot going on. It's Tectober. Everyone is basically ferociously throwing everything AI into the furnace. And we've got a lot of software, a lot of hardware things to talk about, a bunch of news things. Let's start off with news item number one is AI generated video. Neil is going social. It's this week alone, we saw Meta and Google and OpenAI all basically creating entire services to go up against TikTok, standalone TikTok over there, which is finally getting to almost be a US company potentially soon. But we have new all AI generated for your page driven services that are being rolled out by all of the three companies and presumably by a lot of other folks as well. And we will have a lot of links in the show notes about discussion of this. There's a lot of it's not just the services themselves, but there are some strategic elements. Video, as they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words, and video is probably worth 10,000 or 100,000 words. Both in terms of people consuming, people's attention being consumed as people consume the videos, and then also this is all huge amounts of new data that can be used to train the future AI models and build inference on top of that. And on top of that, self-advertising against all of this. So there's a lot of stuff going on here. So this is a very big set of developments from all of them. And all of the big companies are going to be spending a lot of resources on this. So that's news item number one. News item number two, OpenAI is Sam Altman. We know the whole industry has been on a tear building AI compute, hundreds of billions of dollars being invested in not just AI compute, but AI power, which is the gating factor. I wrote a post about this a couple of years ago that, by about this time, we're going to see power as the big gating factor. I think by about this time next year, it'll be things like memory and so on, but I'm getting ahead of myself. But OpenAI, Sam Altman basically said, hey, by 2033, we plan to have 250 gigawatts of data center powered compute infrastructure, gobbledygook numbers, but that is about a third of all the power in the United States. If you consider that today it costs about $50 billion a year to build a gigawatt data centers, and by the way, there's barely one or two yet built. Elon's doing one, Meta's doing another one, Google is on a fast tear, Microsoft's on a fast tear, OpenAI certainly, with Oracle's help, erupted in market cap, adding half an OpenAI, as we talked about a couple of weeks ago. So when you consider that 1 gigawatt of data centers is about $50 billion, that's about $12.5 trillion. That's about 10% of the global GDP of the planet. And so these are obviously very, I would say, aspirational numbers. And this is a company that, is growing very fast, 5 billion, going to 10 billion plus in revenues, etc., but nowhere close to $1 trillion in revenues. So what is going on here? Well, what's going on here, I had a post up there where I put, the famous scene from 2001 Space Odyssey, the apes basically, when they discovered that they could use a bone as a tool and scare the other apes away and intimidate them. This is intimidation. This is basically OpenAI saying to everybody else, hey, stay away. I'm going to build these things faster. Don't come close to me. And so this is intimidation going on. And at the same time, there are a lot of analysts and a lot of observers who are saying, hey, this is evidence that this is a bubble. AI is a bubble. These guys are talking insane numbers and so on and so forth. And this is a bubble because, there's no revenue here. But that's besides the point. It's one of my reads of the week. I'm getting ahead of myself on that piece of the equation. But there is a very interesting game of theater that's going on. And that's an important element to understand. Again, a lot of discussion on this. We'll have this in the show notes as well. News item number 3 is it's back again. Should Apple have its own AI chatbot to compete with all the others? And that debate is going on. There were some very smart people who kind of posit that there's a lot of reasons they should. I had a post up that said, well, they shouldn't because they have 2.5 billion users of Apple devices. They're a gateway. They can get paid for all of this. and they can build the delivery mechanisms, devices, which is another one of our major topics this week. That basically can be the highways for all the AI that is to come, all the applications that is to come. So that debate is back on. So those are the three major news items among so many things going on that I thought I'd just kind of put on the podium, and we can talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, getting into the first thing, which is obviously probably the biggest thing that happened this week, is Sora 2 and the Sora app. Not surprising in terms of it coming out. I think this is something everyone expected
This
as
is
the
the
next
OpenAI one.
evolution.
Yes.
Yeah, this is what everyone expected to come. There were a couple of reports, and them actually doing this was not very surprising. But I guess more surprising has been the discussion around it on Twitter, especially. I'm seeing, I think 90% of the videos I actually have seen generated from this sort of Sam Altman doing something. Whether it's Sam Altman stealing, groceries from the store, or Sam Altman doing this or doing that. It's obvious that people are right now maybe using it more as a gag, and it'll take some time for it to settle in. But it will be cool to see how people use this to actually create content. There's educational content, or even similar to things that we do. I mean, I can see a world where we upload a script off of some news that's come out that we don't want to wait a whole week to talk about in a podcast, and immediately generate, our heads talking about that on a format like this. So it's fascinating. I think there's a lot of social engineering, as we always discuss, to be done around it. Obviously, I think most people's first reaction to it is this is very bad because this isn't real stuff. This is all generated
AI
synthetic.
slop. AI slop.
And I don't entirely disagree with that, especially as a person who's on TikTok maybe a bit more than I should be. It's weird times. We're gonna have to see where this stuff goes.
One person's AI slop is another one's AI treasure.
Yeah.
Glass always half full. I always, this is a very important point to bring up, because whenever anything comes about, calculators, our kids won't learn to do the math themselves. It's on and on. There's always the upside, and we never see the upside, only because the upside possibilities are not real yet. We can't imagine them. Most people don't know what they want until the tools, the capabilities to do things with them are available. And that's when they say, oh my God. And then a year later, you're going to take away my calculator over my dead body. No. So that's the thing. So one person's AI slop, I'm serious. What we're calling AI slop, and there was another term that was invented this last few weeks called work slop. There's a lot of these AI tools are being used to create spreadsheets and PowerPoints and presentations and so on. There was a big story which I didn't add to today's news. Microsoft is working very aggressively, not with OpenAI, but with Anthropic, with their Claude models, to basically redo Copilot for the office. And so there's a lot of tools to create work slop. That was the article, because people said, well, this means there's going to be a lot of work slop that's going to be really bad. And the flip of it is this, allows people to process more information, hopefully create good presentations, good spreadsheets, good documents, the kinds of things we've always done for the last 20, 25 years, and actually do more interesting things with this stuff. So glass half full, glass half empty.
Yeah.
We'll see somewhere along there. It'll net out, I think, a little bit on the positive side, but that's the naive uncle of yours saying those words. So anyway, so there's a lot to dig in here. The one thing I'll just add to this, this collection of news, because it ties to some of the other things we're going to talk about as well. Meta also, late breaking news today, they also announced that starting December 16th, they're going to start to use all the Meta AI conversations that are being going on. They've not really told us how many Meta AI, the chat things are going on across their 3.5 billion users of Facebook and Instagram and WhatsApp and so on. But it's a lot of users, but they're going to use that to target ads using AI. Why? Because, well, Meta makes $50 billion a quarter in revenues on advertising, and this is $200 billion. If they can add 10, 20, 30% on top of that with this stuff, that pays for some of this stuff. So that's the good news for them. Good news for their shareholders, you and I inclusive. But bad news, potentially, for users, because they're not going to care. And as usual, just like the last 20 years, they are the product. Their text was the product on these services for the last 20 years that made Facebook. But now it's the ambient reality of what's going on around us, whether it's in our chats or the Meta glasses, which we're going to talk about. that have the displays and the smart this and the smart that are basically going to be as we're walking around conducting our lives, they're basically taking a note of all of that and saying, oh, they're talking about going hiking this weekend. Let's put in some hiking ads and so on. Well, maybe I don't want people to listen to that, which is what, these are real issues, privacy, etc. And that's why it's very good that we have competition. We have Meta, we have Google. Those are advertising driven companies. But then we have Apple, and then we have a bunch of other companies that are also going to try and figure out other types of business models on this. We need robust competition as these technologies are emerging. So very important issues in terms of all of these collective news items of the week, which kind of brings us into our main topic, which is that we're seeing a whole array of voice and AI enabled voice devices. We've been waiting for a year now for Amazon to redo their Alexa device called Alexa Plus, which is AI optimized. It was delayed. So Amazon released some of this stuff this week, and they're going to be rolling it out slowly over the next 6 months or so. So this is a major development that a lot of people have been waiting for. And we know Apple, which had also its AI-powered Siri, which was delayed over the last couple of quarters, they've put a flag in the sand and said, we're going to have it out next 26. OpenAI bought Johnny Ive's company for $6.5 billion. They're going to have AI devices next week. We've talked about all of this stuff on the show. But that is one of our major topics of the week. And Google also, late breaking news this week, they also announced the Google Gemini will be available retroactively on all of the millions of Google devices that have been sold into homes, just like Alexa and Siri and HomePod devices that will go back 4 or 5 years. And Gemini will replace Google Assistant. So it'll be more of the interactive chat and all of the stuff that we are now used to with OpenAI. And so that'll be an important development. And then Google also has new HomePod version of their, what they used to call Nest. They're retiring that name, but they have AI neural processors and so on. Those gizmos will be available in the spring next year. And they will also provide enhanced live Gemini services, subscriptions and so on and so forth. All the three major companies are really leaning in to provide all of these AI-enabled voice devices. And this is important. Why? Because over 100 million of these things have been already sold into households. And, a couple of hundred million people using this in the next 6 to 12 months is big AI usage that's above and beyond AI chatbots, and that's an important trend.
Yeah, it's a trend we've discussed a couple of times here. I've written about it as well as voice being the next obvious iteration and what the GUI is. Obviously, we had the terminal, we had point and click, we had touch, and now we'll have voice. Voice is, of course, nothing new, but with LLMs, the amount of power that can be leveraged behind the scenes to actually make these conversational assistants is very real. Hopefully, we'll be able to start getting these things in hand soon to start testing. I mean, I think you touched on it very well. This is a spot where it's not like the iPhones, it's not like the new Android phones where you have to get the newest one to be able to leverage all the compute needed to run these things. Google saying that you might be able to run Gemini on older devices that they've shipped in years past is promising because it lowers that barrier of entry a bit to where everyone now who has these things in their homes will be able to use them. So hopefully, and I know we have plenty of these in the house, so hopefully we'll be able to start using it soon and provide some feedback for it.
And I hope they fix one of our burning issues that we've had for a very long time, which is, hey, Google, Apple, Amazon, please, before you release any of these AI things, fix this one issue. Most people have more than 1 or 2 or 3 devices in their homes. Make these things smart enough to know which device you're talking to. If I'm talking to a couple of people, one in this room, one in that room, each of those people have separate names. These devices, when you ask a question, they all answer. And it's typically the one that's furthest away in the farthest room that tries to answer. So please fix that. See, just happened. As we're talking, as right on cue, I don't even know if it's a Google device or an Alexa device or a Siri. Hey, Google, stop. See, it wasn't the G company. The G device
So now
also
another
jumped
one
in and
started.
said, hey, let me try and answer that. So
Yeah.
please fix this problem before you do any of these fancy AI things. So that's number one. Number two is the business that a lot of this is software. One of the reasons Google
Yeah.
has a advantage here is that they have the compute infrastructure to serve all of this stuff. So you don't really necessarily need all the fancier local devices just yet. Yes, if you have them, you can do more things, but is a, hey, Google, stop. Thank you. See, this is a live demonstration of a very real burning user problem that needs to be solved before all of you companies, and you know who you are, continue to spend the billions of dollars doing the stuff. Solve that problem first. It is a fundamental. It's not a roadblock. It's a literally a crevice, a chasm in the usability of these devices that needs to be fixed. So I'll get off my soapbox on that one. But this is a major topic of our show today. But it's also a major thing that we can be excited that all of these AI enabled services that people have been waiting for such a long time beyond chatbots are finally on their way. I mean, recognize that ChatGPT, which kind of kicked off the whole thing, it's been about 1,040 some days now since then. So the world has changed a lot. Trillions of dollars are being expended, etc. We've come very far, very fast, but the
Yeah.
work to really make these things useful has barely just begun. And that's
Yeah.
why this is all kind of interesting. Which brings us to our read of the week, Neil. Why
Yeah.
don't you kick us off here?
Sure. I'll take the lead on this one. So mine was news that probably broke maybe 10 minutes before we started recording this, just showing how fast this stuff is coming out nowadays. It's a piece from Bloomberg, specifically Mark Gurman, who of course reports on everything Apple. And the headline is Apple shelves Vision headset revamp to prioritize Meta-like AI glasses. Essentially, the report for anyone who doesn't want to go through it. It's no surprise that the only offering Apple has right now is Apple Vision Pro, which came out a few years ago, and to no surprise, is maybe not being talked about as much just because it was a technology that even when it came out, it was said a lot that this is expensive. This is just a look into what the future can be. It was not meant to be a mass adopted, mass produced user device. And of course, since Meta, as you can see by the glasses change on the side of me here, Meta has been pushing very hard on this with the newest release of their display glasses is rivaling what Apple had with the Apple Vision Pro. Obviously, it's a slightly different form factor, which makes it a lot more socially acceptable. And yeah, so the news is that Apple is seeing this. Of course, it's Apple. They've been working on this internally. The rumor was that they were going to release these glasses with the display in maybe 2027, but they've shifted resources away from the Vision Pro to fast track this project. The report also included that as soon as next year, we could see Apple release glasses without a display. So similar to the Meta Ray-Bans that have been around for a couple of years, that'll have a camera, speaker, microphone, and will be dependent on an iPhone. But the ones that will be fully independent from an iPhone, similar to the Vision Pro, but have the same form factor as the glasses, will probably have to come out in 27 or maybe even late 26, depending on how much they fast track this. But yeah, it's something that we've discussed a lot. It's breaking news, so I thought I'd put it in as my read of the week, a bit of a cheat from me. But yeah, what do we think?
It's a timely cheat, and I'm very excited because, as you know, I'm already a fan of these glasses. I already ordered and canceled my Vanguard version of these Meta glasses, which are the sporty ones, etc. Why did I cancel? Again, it comes back to this privacy thing, Neil. I'm not that I'm doing anything super secret, etc. I just don't. If I have a choice, and by the way, in the next week or two or a few weeks or whatever, Google's going to announce their smart glasses as well. Amazon's got their glasses coming. So we're going to have, by the time, first quarter next year rolls out, we're going to have several choices. And I'm glad
Yeah,
Apple, is reshifting gears. I mean, sure, they have resources to do all of it, but they're saying, okay, we're just going to focus on this, which I think is a good thing. And if I have to, and we'll do a lot of discussion and writing about this, but Apple, if I have to take those four companies alone, I would trust Apple. I put right, obviously, the top of my list because they don't focus on advertising as much. So I can trust that they're not going to monetize it. And today, as I said, Meta announced that as of December 16th, they're going to monetize the chats on Meta AI. Well, guess what? They're going to do the same thing at some point very soon with the stuff that I'm seeing through these glasses, presumably with my permission. They're going to do the same thing with all the gizmos they're going to sell me. And I'd rather, if I had a choice, I'd rather go first with a company that wasn't doing the advertising sale thing, because privacy is a thing. It's one of those things that, maybe it didn't matter in the first 20 years of social media when it was all text based and so on. Maybe it will matter more, because if you think about it as a thought experiment, this is literally like having. There was a famous ad, and we'll find the YouTube video, etc., where we talked about the privacy implications, which is that there's a person that just walks around with you all day long and records everything you're doing, and makes notes and so on, and is constantly just selling all the stuff. That's literally what's going on. And none of us would stand for that personally. We do
Yeah.
value our privacy. We just take it for granted because we don't think about it that more than that. And this is
Yeah.
an important issue. And there are billions of dollars attached to this from an advertising point of view, which is why Meta's doing what they're doing. So even though they're first out of the gate with the best glasses, they're the first also out of the gate on the advertising piece, which is an important piece, which is why I postponed getting the Vanguard. Now, having said that, I still am signed up for my the Meta display. I have an appointment at the end of the month to go to a sunglass place nearby and get it demoed and test, just like what we had to do with the Vision Pro. And
Yeah.
that's the other aspect, because we talked about it last week's show. Most people, half the people have prescriptions and so on. There's a lot of friction attached to this. So there's a hope by Zuckerberg that this stuff is going to replace our smartphones. It's not as easy, because these things, they got to look good, they got to feel good, they got to adjust to my each individual's eyes and so on. This is a slower burn kind of thing, and that's why it's good to have more competition. Apple is also rumored to be doing AirPods in the next year or so with cameras, etc. It doesn't necessarily all have to be on the face. So there's a lot of innovation to come. So I'm
Yeah.
glad you put up that as your read of the week. My read of the week is again, it's tied to this euphoric environment in AI. There's a lot of debate, or is this a bubble? And every time in every tech wave, innovations on the underlying technology are going parallel, sometimes connected, sometimes not connected to the financial markets. And right now, the financial markets are more enthusiastic about all of this stuff, which they tend to do. And as a result, there is increasing talk of, hey, is there an AI bubble? And there was a write up by a longtime critic of the AI wave, a fellow by the name of Ed Zitron. He wrote a very long piece. I pointed out, and I made it my read of the week, because it's very long. It's 18,000 words. So
Wow.
it's going to take you an hour and a half to read this thing. Most people won't read it, but I read it for you twice. It's the reason it's interesting is because he basically puts everything in the kitchen sink. He brings up all the details in terms of arguing against what's going on, and the technology issues, the political issues, the financial issues, etc., and literally and has a lot of links and so on, so you can research the case that he makes in detail. So it's worth kind of at least perusing it or getting it ChatGPT to summarize it. Excuse me. So that is my read of the week,
Okay.
which takes us to our obsession of the week.
Yeah. Obsession of the week. So what I had was a Wall Street Journal opinion article, essentially something that we've also talked about a lot here, but just to drive it home and continue the conversation on this, because I think every time we meet, our experience with this stuff is shifting. It's a piece titled "How to Diminish the Dangers of Social Media," and it has less to do with what's happening, which is obvious to everyone that people are on their phones and on social media more than ever, but more or less how this could be proactively changed through habits. In the case of kids, through parental controls, and how potentially government regulation and all these other things can step in. It's a topic that's very near and dear to us. We've talked about it a lot offline, even just within our family. I think everyone's trying to cut back a bit more on how much they check Facebook or WhatsApp. And yeah, I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on it and have a bit of a casual discussion on where we see this going from an attention point of view, because you mentioned attention a bit earlier in the episode, and I think that's the biggest word to highlight here is attention. I think attention is the most valuable currency that we have right now.
Look, everything in life, there's an aphorism for this, right? Everything in moderation. And, it applies to technology, it applies to food, it applies to everything we do, in our interests, our passions, etc. And this stuff is no different. Now, here, the issue is our kids are being exposed to this earlier than ever before. And there are issues, there are studies that, it affects their development differently, etc. So there's a lot of legislation across the world in various markets and so on. And the tech companies are obviously fighting it, and everything from age verification to amount of time people spend on these things. Apple has done its bit of, you know, monitoring tools and devices on the phones, etc. But also, parents are trying to figure this out as well. I mean, you've talked about your Gen Z circle, self-conscious, because your generation is actually more aware of, eating
Yeah.
better, drinking less, and a lot of the bad things that other generations did. Your generation is, generally speaking, statistically a little bit more aware of this moderation thing, and this is no different. There was one thing that I did read this week, which was interesting, which is that some parents are resorting back to landlines for their kids, kids under 10 or 12 and so on. And they talked about, and there was a Washington Post article, the link is in the show notes, and there's a company called Tin Can, which a father came up with. And it's basically a Wi-Fi enabled landline phone that's in a home, and the parent programs all the kids' friends on the thing, and when it rings, the kids like the old, you don't remember this, but when we used to have a phone, and there was only one phone in the house, and if it rang, everyone ran to it because they thought, someone was calling them. And the same thing, the kids run to this phone and they pick up and they know someone they know is calling them. They just don't know which one of their friends. And that's the suspense. Whereas today, the smartphone, there's no mystery. You see the person's page photo pop up and da 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 da, and it's all, it's no moderation. So anyway, so the tin can is very popular. It's sold out. It's available in many states and so on. And so, it's an interesting counter trend to what you're talking about. Unfortunately, all these kinds of things are going to be in the minority. Majority people will still abuse these things. Kids will still be affected. So we from there, on that point of view, we just have to, as parents, as educators, as adults, we have to do a better job teaching younger people and older people, for that matter, how to deal with this flood of information. We talked early part of the show, the content that's coming at us, that's AI generated, etc. There's just a tsunami of content that's going to come at us. So we are going to have to edit the stuff faster, consume it faster, digest it faster, summarize it faster. Hopefully the AI stuff itself can help us do this as much as it generates. But these are all key parts of this issue. It's an important point to be aware of, talking, thinking, discussing. So I'm glad they are part of our reads of the week. So
Yeah.
which brings us to um, the our burning questions toward the end of the show here.
Yes.
And my burning question to you, Neil, since a long time ago, I talked about how you kind of made me a YouTube consumer 5, 6, 7 years ago, because you were early adopting YouTube as a way to consume video content. But the other thing I remember, a few years ago, you and your friends were very into Snapchat, or what used to be called Snapchat, and now it's Snap, etc. And we had a conversation offline a few days ago, and you kind of mentioned that your habits around Snap have changed.
Yeah.
And I thought it'd be interesting to talk about that, because that was, Snap was people joke that, Evan Spiegel, who's the founder, it has been the effective, chief product developer for Meta, because, Zuckerberg has, because he couldn't buy Snapchat,
Yeah.
he copied a lot of the innovations like stories and so on. And the rest is history, as they say. And I'm curious, where do you think Snap is in terms of
Yeah.
role in this landscape?
Yeah, I think Snap has fallen behind a lot, just in terms of my circles, but also just the trends online that I'm seeing. I think you hit it right on the head that Instagram is Sherlock, for lack of better words, a lot of the features away from Snapchat. But just even anecdotally with me, I think it ends up becoming a growing up thing. I think Snapchat was like a transitional messaging interface that, you're in middle school, you're in high school, you want to send pictures to your friends that we're at this game, or we're doing this whole disappearing message fad that was around. But I think, as you grow older, there's just less of a need to do that. You kind of take a step back. That's kind of what happened to me. One morning I woke up and I was like, I don't need, like, why am I using streaks? Why am I sending people just pictures of rain? Because it turns into, it's funny because you do it and you do it so much that you forget the intentionality behind it. And sometimes you would just be taking pictures of literally anything and just sending it to friends just to keep a conversation going. There was no substance behind what was being talked about. And that's kind of what happened to me, is I think I just shifted away from that and wanted to have more intentional conversations that were actually like of substance rather than just pictures being sent back and forth. And obviously, the best way to do that is through text. I actually deleted Snapchat recently because it's just there's so much spam. There's so many ads on the platform now. It's not at all what it used to be. But more than that, I can reach out everyone I want just over text now, just because that's the more mature, I guess, for lack of better words, way of communicating.
Text is it. Mark Zuckerberg, no less, said here basically runs Meta now pretty much via text. So,
Yeah,
and he's kind of grown up a lot in the last little bit as well. So that's a very well thought out answer
yeah.
to my burning question. And you have a burning question for me, I think that's
I
kind of
do, yeah.
ties to.
It's something that's maybe a bit premature because we haven't gotten these things in hand yet. It came about because I was watching a video uploaded yesterday by Casey Neistat, who's a great YouTuber, makes amazing content, and he was discussing the Meta versus Apple of smart glasses, but more or less framing it as, the promise that smart glasses have provided to us as potentially being this next device that succeeds the smartphone. And he frames it in a way that when the Apple Vision Pro came out, he was obsessive about them. He was one of the few people that was very bullish on it and saying that this is going to change computing. And even he doesn't use them anymore. He, like many other people, has a drawer in their house where they
Huh?
put all the electronics, and it's just been sitting around. And the Meta Ray Bans have been his go to. He's bought several in the last year alone, he said. But my question, I guess, for you is, for someone who's maybe played around a bit more with the smart glasses, I've only anecdotally kind of
Yeah.
interacted with them. Do you see this as a promise for what the future of computing could be, or is it potentially just another fad?
I think it's somewhere in between. It's a great question, and this is a more personal opinion than anything else. So, we're not reporting the news as we say. We're just talking about our observations and our thoughts, and so there's a bias here. But in general, and we've talked a little bit about this. Glasses are something. Half the world's population wears them, mostly for vision correction, near, far, whatever. And I got to tell you personally, and this, your dad had a similar experience. About 22 years ago, I took the risk of my life, one of my major risks of my life, and got LASIK surgery on both eyes because I had worn glasses for a very long time since I was a teenager. And this LASIK thing was a new technology, and they were like, oh, promising me no glasses for decade or more. And I took a risk. There was I did a lot of soul searching scientific questions because there was a teeny chance that something could go wrong and could hurt your eyes and so on. And I got both eyes done. And in fact, your aunt, our first date, I showed up with these Terminator glasses because I had to, you had to wear these big dark glasses to protect your eyes 24 hours after you got these things. Long story short is, a couple of days later, it was like magical. Genie had given me amazing superpowers. My eyes were 20/20. And for the next 15 years, I never looked back and I never wore glasses again. So I spent 20 years of my life running away from glasses. And now it's ironical that, at this stage, I'm considering wearing glasses again, which is weird. And that's a social thing. I think people like to wear glasses, but it's tough because, and also there's indoors and outdoors, fashion and so on and so forth. And just you talked about Casey having 4 or 5 pairs. Well, Casey is, relatively, affluent. These are $400-500 things. If you buy everything that Meta offers today, which are barely smart glasses, right? Just two cameras, a little bit of earphones. You could spend $400-500 a piece. And that's before you get to the $700-800 smart glasses. $100 today, post tariffs, just on these gizmos. Yet most of us, we hang on to our smartphones, which are, $500 to $1,000 for 2-3 years before we upgrade. So this expectation that everyone's going to spend for at least 2 pairs of glasses, one indoor, outdoor. A lot of people don't like transition. I think it's unreasonable. And so, yeah, I think the smart glasses are going to be one way. We're going to see some AI services along with smart watches and other devices, whatever Johnny Ive and OpenAI cook up and all these other things. There'll be a proliferation of devices. And over the next 3 or 4 years, we're going to figure it all out. But none of these things, I think, equal the smartphone for now. And in fact, the smartphone, I think, has a more important role to play over at least the next 3 years, growing up with these things or being a bridge for these things than anything else. So I don't think it's either or. I think that all of these things will leverage the smartphone. And so we will be upgrading our smartphones even probably at a faster pace as we try these different things, because there's not enough room into these in these things. So the power, the processing has to be offloaded onto pucks or smartphones, storage, etc. So technically, there are a lot of issues. So for all of those reasons, I think this is not smartphone to glasses. I think it's smartphone and glasses and other devices. So for what it's worth. But thank
Great.
you for a great burning question. And with
Of
that, I
course.
think we're going to call it the end of our show. Again, thanks as usual for joining us. As usual, please like and subscribe if you are so inclined. And your feedback, questions, comments, always welcome. And as always, stay tuned. Thank you.
See you next time.